A situation like this happen. I mean, I don't know what happened exactly with, the resident and your systems and stuff like that. But obviously, I mean, from what you told me, there were errors that were very much preventable, and I just hope to God that it doesn't happen to somebody else.
And we want to put systems in place to make sure that it doesn't. So that protocol, remember back to that first item on our list, now that protocol was an important first step. It's not the only step. Even with the protocol, if we don't have the training in place or the education for our staff associated with the protocol, there's still an opportunity for error or mistake to be made. So we've put a training program in place, and we've used that now over the course of the last 4 months or so in our simulation lab. We've used that for every nursing student, every resident, and every existing nurse, therapist, technician, and physician on staff. So we've gotten through all of our staff, and I can tell you that's been a significant undertaking, but it's been a huge advantage to the organization. So we have a protocol in place. We've provided education. Help me with our third area.
Yeah, supply kit.
Thank you. We've put a supply kit in place. And the importance of that supply kit is there's now one item, a tub. If you think about those tubbies that you use to maybe keep your kids' toys in, we used one of those tubs. It's as simple as that. But every item that we need to perform that procedure is now in the tub with the step-by-step recipe, so to speak, but the protocol for the staff to use. So they grab the tub, everything they need is in the tub. It'll give us the assurance that this won't happen again.
Before you go on, I just want to make sure that we're tracking you. What's really important to my clients is to make sure that this doesn't happen again on this unit, but throughout your organization. So the protocol and the training you're talking about is really happening throughout the organization, not just on this floor.
I'm so glad that you asked for that clarification. Absolutely. It is throughout the organization. It's part of our general orientation program. It's also part of our annual skills day now for those staff that I mentioned. The other thing is we've put a system in place where, but for an extreme emergency, we wouldn't provide this procedure that we did for your mom in any other area besides interventional radiology. So we've isolated the procedure to one specific department, but we've also put a process in place through our training to make sure that everybody understands that there's one place for those patients to go to have that procedure.
And how will we know that this protocol is being implemented? I mean, it's one thing to draft it, to put it on paper and even to train, but as we know, organizational memory sometimes fades. What is your plan for really ensuring that this is going to get embedded in what you do?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that we've really spent a fair amount of time with. So I can tell you that we have a team of staff who I have placed that on we've done a number of things, but we've placed that on our daily huddle boards. And our huddles, if you recall when your mom was in, you probably observed our staff gathering around at change of shift and having a discussion around the board in a pretty public place, but usually the hallway there by the nurses' station. And it's really a day-to-day education, but also immediate problem-solving tool that we use. So we've placed it on all of our huddle boards throughout the organization as not only the first line education or heads up that something's changing in that respect, but also to make all of our staff aware. Then what we've done is, we've hardwired it into our practice. And once we do that, we have periodic skills validation, but we also have a process validation. So we're looking at that on a quarterly basis through our quality committees.
How does this sound to you? I mean, as you're hearing this, is this enough?
As long as it changes, yeah. A lot of some of that goes over my head, I can say.
Yeah,
but it's not.
I guess that all sounds good as long as as much as you can avoid it happening again to somebody else. I mean, I just don't want her. I don't want her death to be in vain.
I want to assure you that your mom's death wasn't in vain. And so we really have put some very significant systems in place. We don't want this to happen to anybody else.
Yep.
And I do want to reassure you from the corporate level, of our organization, that when we have events such as this that happen, we do use it as a learning opportunity, which I know is much more than that for you all, but to take it across the system so that, because it could happen in this hospital, we need to be sure that it doesn't happen in our other hospitals. So I just want to reassure you that we are using this event to help improve our delivery of care all across the system and not just here at this one hospital.
Is this personal enough for you? It sounds to me like this hospital is really authentically trying to prevent what happened to your mom. But, do you need anything more? Do you want them to use her name when they do the training? Do you want, what are your privacy interests? Do you want to be more private about something like doing this in her memory? Have you given that any thought?
I hadn't. I don't know, let me think about that.
I was going to say that's not something that you have to decide today, certainly, but if you think about it and feel that that's important to you and your family, that's
Is that something I can call you later about?
Of course.
'Cause I think that's...
I think the real important piece of all of this discussion is keeping the open lines of communication between you all and the hospital and the system as a whole.
Your mom had myasthenia gravis as well, and the type of procedure that she had was pretty common with patients with that. And so with your permission, and it's something you could really think about and let us know how you feel, we'd like to share our findings with that association as well. That would do two things. It would allow that association to get the word out to all of its membership, which is significant. That's real patients and real families. And so we can all learn from that too. Secondly, your crying is making me cry. Secondly, we would use that association then also to maybe offer ourselves up as speakers at some of their conferences, for the health professionals that do attend that, so they can learn from our mistakes.
I like that very much.
All right. Why don't we just give a huge round of applause for an amazing job.
You're really good too.
It's a vicious cycle.
Wow. Wow. Kate and I in the back were sitting there talking about where we were 3 workshops ago at the very beginning and where we are now. Pretty freaking awesome. I mean, this is my little opinion. It's freaking awesome. So, kind of, what was your plan? What were you hoping to accomplish? How do you think you did? Why don't you share some of what your internal thinking was?
We had a really quick, I'm going to say a very brief conference over here along the sidelines before we came up, and decided that really we'd already played out what occurred. And we wanted to make sure that if there were any questions about that we could quickly answer those, but then to move on to the compensation piece of the resolution. And I think Jen did a great job of that.
Were you surprised? Remember, one of the preps is, let's think about what the questions are. Were you surprised by any of the questions that came at you at all, or were they pretty much ones that you sort of expected?
I think they were all what we would have expected, and actually less than we would have expected, honestly.
Okay. Good. What'd you guys think in terms of, Andy, we'll start with you first.
I thought you both did great. I really do. I think you showed a grand amount of empathy, and it's quite fun. It was quite interesting that even you were listing all these things that had been done, and it couldn't have been, with a softer touch, and still there's something so hard for me to go, oh, is that enough? Oh, is that enough? Because she's still gone, right? So it's a really tall order for you guys in that seat, because even when you're giving it 110% empathy-wise and making all the adjustments, there's still the loss. And I think you both did a great job in a very tough spot. Yeah.
I agree. I think just the way you entered too, obviously at this point we would have had a lot of interaction, and that sort of immediately coming in. And it suited, we talk about this a lot of different conferences, trying to shoehorn that kind of, it doesn't always work, but you just clearly were comfortable with that sort of interaction, and it just immediately made me feel like, yeah, that's exactly who she is and where she's coming from. And I thought that you really, I think you did the navigation of trying to explain versus, trying to listen and be empathetic. I mean, I do think at times, when you sort of ask me questions about, well, is this helping? And you said it's kind of going over my head. It did a little bit, but I don't know, it wasn't a big deal. And then I kind of I thought you sort of going off about the financial bit and saying, we'll figure that out, we can talk about this, made me more comfortable, because I think that would be a very difficult conversation to have.
That is a hard conversation. I'm on the edge of my seat what you were going to ask.
I was really comfortable by the fact that you two are going to work that piece out.
But you guys did a great job.
So Marty, what do you think? I mean,
I thought a great job. I really liked your presence, your body language. It felt embracing. You felt empathetic to me too, but just a tick more reserved. And the way you leaned in when you wanted to be more empathetic, I thought was great too. You seemed like a realistic team. I did want to interrupt your flow. The way I think a lawyer would. I mean,
I didn't let you because I saw you going like this, and I just kept talking to you.
So it was good.
Really, I'm trying to answer their questions right now, and we'll get to you.
And as a whole person, I would have liked to just sat here and let that conversation happen, but I also wanted to make this a little realistic, and the lawyer would be trying to steer a little bit. So I also was impressed by the follow-through. So if just the way in which you had been listening, it's I want to call you Patrick, but it's Andy's point that you clearly had been listening all along, and then coming back to them with things that they had asked for that you had figured out were meaningful to them. I thought that was great.
good, thank you. How about folks in the audience? Where's our chat box? Kate's got one. There's another one over here. Comments from the audience. How about what'd you guys? Teresa, you wanna?
My part.
Here you go. Oh, sorry.
I thought you did a great job. I thought all the things that the actor said, you were very empathetic. I like the way, Jen, you leaned forward into the conversation at times. The hugging at the beginning was great. I didn't realize, I had to wait a minute and take into account that maybe you've had several conversations for that, because obviously you can't come in the first time or maybe even the second time and be hugging like that. I didn't like that, Marty, when you were acting like a lawyer.
But was it realistic?
It was very realistic, and he was I did get that you were trying to interrupt and draw them down somewhere else, but you had everything in line, which was excellent, that you had all your things planned, your conversation planned, you had all the things that you had put in place, which sounded excellent. And even though it was over their head, I feel like either their lawyer could have explained it to them, or they could have come back to you and asked you for more questions. And the fact that you offered, you were very specific. I think that's really important.
Awesome, thank you. Jack?
I have a feeling asking the audience for the rest of the list wasn't necessarily appropriate.
It was improv.
But the actor stayed in character, so that's, yep.
I thought you did a great job, but I would have asked for the hospital to be named after me.
There you go. Jack Gentry General. There we go. I like that ring. Susan, any comments from, again, a patient advocate standpoint?
I also thought it was a great interaction. I think just from a personal standpoint, I'm a very, like an action-oriented person. So it wouldn't have been sufficient for Marty to just say, I'll have a conversation with you. I would want to know more about, can you clearly tell me what next steps will transpire? So Marty will have the conversation with you, and then this will happen, and then this will happen. So I would have been looking for a little bit more clarity on the next steps, but otherwise, very nice.
Yeah. Other comments from?
Say something. I think just from my experience with these conversations, I think one of the main points, to your point, is to really relayed to the family that we wanted open lines of communication, and that this did not have to be the final meeting with us in trying to reach resolution, because there are so many pieces to resolution. So I think that's one message that I think we as MedStar try to communicate all the time with every conversation, honestly, with families. Let's keep the lines of communication open, and we appreciate you letting us working, to allow us the opportunity to work with you.
Yeah. Marty, I'm glad you asked the question about memorializing her in some way, within the organization. And one story I can share, how many were at the first workshop? So quite a few of you. So you remember Chrissy Chavez, who was Michelle Baylog's sister, who died because of an overdose and failure to rescue of moderate sedation. So one of the things that we did, and it's not unlike what happened with the process improvements with the central line piece, is we realized that from a culture standpoint, many of the nurses working in the GI suite felt very uncomfortable given the doses they were. They just didn't have the courage to step up and stop the line. So we did a lot of team steps training with the people who worked in the GI suite and other places. And when we did that teaching, for those of you who've had any team steps, your first step is you raise a concern, you're uncomfortable, and at some point you stop the line. So with the permission of the Baylogs, we were able to build into our standard process for nurses to stop the line during a sedation procedure was for the nurses to say, I'm asking you to stop. Michelle is asking you to stop. And everybody in the organization knew who Michelle was. So it didn't matter who the doctor was, who the PA was, anybody else, it was a huge wake-up call. And it meant a lot to the Malizos that was one of the ways that we chose to memorialize that. And I was wondering, Marty, if maybe that's one of the reasons why you asked a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was. I was thinking about that, and I was also thinking about a visit I just made to a hospital that had a death from a fall and built a protocol around it named after the person who had fallen, and they called it Rogers Wheel. It was basically the evaluation for fall risk. And as we went around the hospital to ask about it, we asked nurses, do you know what Rogers Wheel is? And there was just a huge amount of recognition about that. And then a nurse came up to us as we were leaving. She said, 5 years ago, everybody in the hospital would have known what Rogers Wheel is, but it's hard for us to keep it going because people come and go. Mm-hmm. Nurses leave, they come on. And so having that name really helps us. And so, it's that longevity piece because culture does change,
Yeah. So any other comments or reflections from people who saw this, suggestions? I thought they did an amazing job. And it was really good. So, well, let's give it up to them, for them, all that sort of stuff.
You guys do such a good job.
And let's give one more round of applause for our actors doing the incredible job today. If you Google their names online, you'll see they've been pretty active in the acting community and that sort of stuff. So we try to bring the best of the best, and hopefully they'll be part of the final workshop that we put together. Did they know their name? Well, yeah, they were on the first slide and all that sort of stuff we have there. Good. But some of you may have already Googled it, right? So it's Marika Engelhardt is, of course, Jill and Sarah, and Patrick Mulvey, is it Mulvey? That's right. Yeah. Was Andy and Scott. In fact, he's best friends with the other Andy, who was one of the other actors here who had the Scottish accent. But yeah, I recommend that you go ahead and Google them, and you'll see some pretty amazingly cool stuff. So, of course, I've lost it again. My slide advancer is probably in the back or somewhere. Yep. So, coming down the home stretch here, wondering about this whole operationalizing and lessons learned. one of the things I will just toss out, and this is one of the offers that we make as part of what we do, is how many of you are familiar with Cotter's principles around change management? So you guys are, others heard about that. I mean, the real way to begin to think about how you want to hardwire this, we would highly recommend that you sort of follow these. And we also make an offer, which is if you have a leadership group that you feel needs an engagement to get you going, we are happy to do that. We don't charge for that other than travel expenses, where we're able to bring a patient advocate or myself or others to come in and work with the ones to do that. But Cotter talks about you need to create a sense of urgency, which I think we heard Jack, you say at least 2 or 3 times, you know, the fact that preventable harm is the 3rd leading cause of death in the country should create enough urgency for a lot of people to do that. The next step is get your stakeholders together to have the conversation. And this is in any business. This is what the 2 big things you really need to think about, you know, getting started. Who do you consider stakeholders to be? If you had a magic wand and you could bring the right people to the table, who would they be? What's that? Senior leadership. So senior leadership includes who? What's that? CEO, absolutely. No doubt about it. Who else? CMO? Other C's. What's that? CNO, absolutely. So chief nursing, chief medical, CEO. Who else you haven't mentioned yet that I usually sell this to? Medical staff, clearly their leadership has to be there. There's another person. Finance, absolutely. The chief financial officer. The financial ROI for this, way beyond liability, is massive. Where are some of the financial savings as you are going to sell this in your organization? What are just some of the financial savings? Reputation. What's that?
Lost revenue.
So, absolutely, the revenue piece. Where else will you see it? And what's that? Yeah, so defense costs huge. So on the liability side, it's almost crazy not to think about having a process in place to do this. The other place where the ROI is huge, and just a small paper came out of Hopkins about this because Albert Wu is at Johns Hopkins. He is the one who coined the term second victim. And they're estimating at their hospital alone, having a peer support program in place, a care for the caregiver program, which you need in this context, will save you $2 to $3 million a year easily. MedStar has already seen a huge improvement in staff engagement, and you only need a small number of nurses not leaving or small number of physicians not leaving to save millions in recruitment costs and replacing them. It is just, and with burnout being where it is right now, clearly this kind of process is appealing on all levels, again, on the financial piece. And so, and you need those. Who else do you need to be there at the stakeholder process? So we've got CFO, CMO, CNO, CEO, medical staff leadership, other administrative leader. Who else do you got to have at the table? Yeah. Legal risk and liability. You got to have legal risk and liability, absolutely. As Marty knows, one of the other things that we do is we can go into an organization and do what's called a gap analysis to look and see how ready are you, and if you have gaps, where might you close them? And as Marty will also say, what are the 3 things, Marty, we're looking for in the organization? 3 classes of people you have to identify if you're going to succeed in doing this. Oh, here. Come on, throw it from there.
So let me see if I've got the definitions right. There are assassins.
Yep.
And the assassins are people in the organization that you're going in with this and they're going to just kill it. They might be quiet, but they're going to just kill it. No,
an assassin is up front. They're clear as can be.
They're up front.
They're like, I shouldn't use the F word. No way are you going to do this. And literally they'll come to you'll come to them because they're in a high position. They'll say, There is no way that we're going to be that transparent with our patients.
So the people that are quiet but not supportive, they're under the poser category, right?
Saboteurs.
They're saboteurs. Okay.
Those are
See,
the
I don't have this.
saboteurs, the passive aggressive.
The passive aggressive, they sit there, they nod, but they are going to have a meeting with somebody else in the organization afterwards, and they're going to say, we will stop this in some way. So it's assassins, it's saboteurs, and then it's posers, and those are the people that are fake. I got that one right.
Yep.
They're the ones that just
Total
say
fakes.
They'll support in one way, but they will not support in another way. And
They'll say, yeah, we already do this, and when the time comes, they'll find it's not quite the right case, or we're not really sure about this, and they'll just kick it down the road. Those are the posers.
So one of the things that Tim does, and I've had a chance to experience this intensely, is you get at some of who those people are by really interviewing many different layers of the organization, including frontline staff. And you get insights from them about who are the ones who are really going to champion this, who are the people in the organization that are trustworthy, and you feed that back, Tim, I think, in your process to leadership.
Right, and you get patient and family engagement going with that, connected to the board, and those are the different ways to begin to think about, So what is another one of the stakeholders we haven't talked about? That would be your PFAC. That is your Patient and Family Advisory Council. It's your community who expects this kind of care. If you really start thinking about getting all those stakeholders together and having that conversation, you can be very effective in beginning to move this piece forward. And we will help you in any way. That's what we talked to Kate about. We promised her that in the beginning. Again, we can't pay for crazy expenses. Getting into Des Moines is a pain in the you-know-what. I just tell you, flying into here is not easy. If you could talk to the airlines, it'd make it easier for us. But no, we're willing to help out. Because our goal, Jack's goal, Teresa's goal, Susan's goal is to push this as far wide as possible, make it the standard for all organizations to begin to doing that. The other part I would recommend in operationalizing, and Jen mentioned this term, we've talked about it at the other two workshops, but I would just like to reiterate it. I think you can regionalize it, Kate, is this notion of the go team. That team that when something unexpected happens, you have the immediate response. You have a surgeon in the OR who is empowered to talk to the wife of the patient who's asleep in the OR, and immediately the whole organization knows about what's going on, and they respond in a way where they understand what happened, they keep constant communication with the family, and they support the caregivers. I think your surgeon, Dr. Tortolani, he got incredible support. And you were happy that he got that support as you began to. So this notion of a three-part go team, which is that start the communication with the family, support the caregivers when you're doing it, and get in there and do the event review. Again, the ROI is huge, and there are ways with critical access hospitals, we're doing this in California now, we're going to begin doing it in Oregon, where you can even think of regionalizing it. There's very clever ways to begin to do this so it doesn't become super expensive doing that. Yeah.
How do we find more statistics on the ROI to share with those that aren't aware? Because obviously I think that would be the fastest way to get a CFO to slow down and listen to this.
So we've got that sheet, right, Marty? I mean, we put together a lot of the publications, the papers, the other stuff out there, peer-reviewed articles, all demonstrating this stuff in Health Affairs and others. And we made a whole list of all of the different pieces of it where we have data to show the change.
Okay, I know I've gotten that to you, but I can get it to you again. It's basically, here's 50 million ROI.
have it.
Okay.
Yep, so it's that hidden link, that electronic link that we send out a week before each workshop that has resources that directly correlate to the content we're going to share at the workshop. I believe those were sent out with the workshop 1 resources, and all those are still available and they continue to build, but I will make a note to make sure it's there, but I believe that was included with the workshop 1 resources.
Yeah. One of the greatest testimonials related to this, which is in the paper that Marty and I are on, it's that recent one, Kate, it's lessons learned from the first 200 hospitals that we worked with. Part of our work is with the Beta Healthcare Group. Now, here is an insurance company who knows a lot about money, who is giving a 10% premium discount to every one of their hospitals that hardwire this. So University of Southern California is one example. Their premium discount, once they hardwire it, will be over $500,000. which pays for a lot of stuff. They get the money, they get it, they've seen the data, and it's published. So there's a nice little section in our paper where Beta talks about how they did the math, how they did this, how they're moving it forward, and why it's a big part of their program doing it. Because it reduces harm and it reduces all that bad stuff, but there's all the other pieces of it that they know will be a big part of it. Well, right, and they are the insurance carrier, which is a beautiful part of it. And what they did in California to pull together all the insurance carriers, every 2 months we meet as the collaborative for communication and resolution programs, where all the carriers come into the same room to talk about, if there's a harm event, how do we make sure that we're all on board? So they have the doctor's company there, they have NorCal there, they have ProAssurance. You literally have 8 insurance carriers in the room all at the same time talking about, we need to support our doctors in this process and the hospitals where they are. That's this notion of Cotter's principles, though, of, get your mission, know exactly what it is, create a sense of urgency, get the stakeholders together, and build a plan. What we're sharing through these 4 workshops is a comprehensive, principled, and systematic approach. You don't want people going rogue. You want to have, at the end of it, these kinds of conversations that have evolved and matured through lots of conversations where you've built a lot of trust doing that. Then as you get small wins, you share the small wins and it begins to spread, and that's pretty much sort of where we are right now.
Tim,
So,
I
go ahead,
also just want to underscore something. I mean, so the ROI document has some papers with statistics there. The number of reports that goes up, the liability savings. It's also got pieces that are about the impact on the medical staff and the impact on care for the caregiver. There's also the lessons learned from mistakes, honestly, that we've made going into systems that frankly just weren't ready for this and delivering programming that didn't get stuck. But the other thing that I really want to underscore that Tim said is just the importance of the liability insurance signal. So when Beta stepped up, I mean, there is some buzz through the liability insurance community about this. And I think there were some companies that were on the fence. The fact that Copic is here today is really a great sign. I mean, we see a company like this and we go, okay, they're paying attention, they're a key stakeholder that sometimes Tim has really had to work to get into the room. Here in Iowa, you've got Copic coming to the room because they want to learn more.
Great, awesome. But I want to give you guys the final word. What I want to do here in the brief remaining amount of time before I turn it over to Kate, and we'll do the chat box here. What I'd like to do is go to each table, have one person volunteer at the table and share like we have done at the others. And then Kate, if we've got somebody to write this down, it'd be great. One volunteer here to say your aha moment, your big lesson learned today, something that you'd be willing to share with the group that was super meaningful for you. Which one of you guys, as you quickly run through your notes and do all that, and I know it's unfair because all the other tables are talking about it. Would you, Amber's going to share the first comment of the lesson learned, and Kate, are we going to be ready?
We are.
All right.
We can wait for Kate to get her stuff set up.
She's totally ready.
She's totally ready. So I think a lot of what we talked about was just the logistics of how you actually, we feel it's probably going to be a lot harder initially to talk about the consent and the paperwork and the candor and explaining that versus it is just having the honest conversation with the patient about what happened. Because we feel like the last couple workshops have given us some tools for that, but just how you talk about the candor and how you just the lead into the conversation of how you kind of get that started is going to be kind of hard. And then also with a lot of times we feel like we're going to maybe having these conversations when there wasn't fault, as the hospital. And so how do you kind of walk those fine lines? And I'm not sure, but Dar's pretty awesome. That's also one of those.
Oh, I think the whole room is pretty sure.
Yeah,
let's give it up for Dar. So
she's just an amazing communicator, and I'm just like in awe just watching her too. So.
Well, and in that, we are big believers in finding those, super communicators to help you do that. Did you find the enactments helpful today in terms of seeing and doing that? Awesome. Great. How about this table? Who here is? There you go. All right. You've been voluntold.
I have been. So we felt that what we got the most out of today was who should be at the table when you have that conversation, making sure that you pick the right people. And that giving, we thought like a card or something just more personal, not a letter or anything saying, when you're ready to talk, we'll be reaching out to you, but you can reach out to us.
Great, awesome, thank you. What'd you learn today?
I think a big aha moment, kind of going off of how to start the conversation, is what Teresa said, is patients will remember the very first sentence that you say, so make sure it's meaningful and some empathic.
Empathic.
There you go.
Yeah, it took me 5 workshops to do that until I finally got that word. Seriously, it was very difficult. Jack. What's that? We voted for Teresa. Oh, all right. Usually he likes to talk, as you guys learn, right?
Well, I'll just say 2 things. One is I went back and said, I rethought about what should someone say is that first sentence. And so for me, it could have been, Jack is okay, but. So I had thought about that before, but I was put on the spot, and I don't think as well. And number 2 is, the thing you all have to remember is errors will never cease to exist pretty much because we're human. And in baseball, you think, oh, he has a .325 batting average. This is excellent. We go to work every day and expect ourselves to bat 1,000. So remember that.
Great. Thank you, Teresa. One of the other comments Bruce Lambert used when we did the training, on point with what you said, and it relates to the cardiac arrest that the woman had with pulling the line out. Some people would just come in and say, because the family, you're coming to have the conversation, the first statement they would make is, just want to make sure you know she's alive, but I have some news that may be difficult to hear. And a kind of a variation on what it is that you just mentioned. Susan.
Well, I haven't been to the other workshops, so this was my first exposure to the process. And it feels so much more human and relatable than litigation. So that would be my comment.
Great, thank you. Marty's already talked too much. Oh, no, maybe not too much. Oh, well then here, go ahead. You always have something to say, but go ahead, please do.
I just want to say that when we invite people like Susan and Teresa and Jack to events like this, sometimes they seem really special because they are really special, but you have people like this in every one of your communities that would really want to help your hospital be the best hospital it could be. So don't be afraid to reach out to the people who have filed complaints or who've been critical of you, because you're going to get great, great feedback from them about how to improve your organization.
Great.
I just want to add one more thing. So when you have kids with lifelong disabilities, you learn that for some things in life, there is no explanation. And there's no answer that can be put in a box with a neat, red ribbon tied around it. So at that point, it becomes an exercise in wanting to be a positive voice and recognize the good things in the healthcare system and help improve what needs to improve. So there's a recognition that some things you cannot explain in this life anyway.
Great, thank you, Susan. Jen?
Sure. Very quickly, I want to touch on your opening line. I never really thought about that actually until today, and it makes me think, what is the first thing you say to families when you walk in? Because you're right, you can never take that back. And so that was very, very helpful. The other thing I would say is this audience has been so interactive and engaged, and there's just so much potential for the future, for the direction that this is going, which makes me very hopeful going forward.
Thank you. Of course. You passed, but I work for you, Jack, so here.
All I know is next time I'm coming up with a great opening line.
God love you, Jack. Amazing. How about this table? Who wants to shout out the lessons learned or aha moment or
Yes. As we talked, I think we keep thinking about what a big undertaking this is and how we need to implement it and things. But I really like the concept of the regionalization of it and to have more help when we're a small entity, that we have other people to bounce things off of and to work through this process with us. I think that's huge.
Yeah, and we do have a team of people. I'll just give you an example without naming the organization, but it's kind of in the South a little bit. I'm having a call on Friday to help coach a huddle with all those questions related to a pediatric patient who had a really bad outcome. So we are available for that kind of stuff, and a bunch of different ones where we can reach in who've had multiple kinds. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We often can help you think about questions you never imagined might come up. Kate, we're available, as you know. We've talked about that. So we just want you all to succeed. Here we go.
So we really like Jen's thought, actually, when you were talking about the many faces of resolution and that it's not always about the money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And more, and Carol Hemmelgarn has written about it, Marty, is wanting to be part of the improvement. They maybe not all, but they just want to be asked, hey, would you like to be part of helping us improve? Which of you guys wants it? Not it. Oh my gosh.
The most impactful thing that I heard was Teresa saying that the first sentence you say is what they will remember. And also learning what is important to the patient and resolving that way, playing into what's going to make them happy in their life.
Awesome. Thank you.
My key takeaway, especially from the first session when it was labeled as an event, not a single occurrence, I thought the manage the event from the beginning was very powerful. And I think a lot of the apprehension that I hear is, the forms and the consent and all that's there. But I guess my takeaway today was it doesn't sound like the forms have to come into play until significantly later. And that here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and here's what I'm going to find out. If that's told from the beginning, has a dramatic effect. So that's really what I took away.
Great, thank you. Who here?
All right, so I guess our main lessons learned is we really love the standard side by the bigger entities, like what have been done. But on the other side, as a smaller rural hospitals, we still want to know more, like what can we do with limited resources and skill set. But another big take-home point is that even though we don't have the people specialized in those things, being there, show a kind gesture could be very helpful as well.
Great, thank you. All right, who's going to speak up?
This might sound silly, but it had never occurred to me to have the patient and family pick the location, for example, as to where you're going to meet. I had always just assumed it would be at the hospital, but, give them as much power and control and comfort as you can, so.
Great, thank you. Have I passed it to every table? Is that it? Kate, you know what that means? It means it's on time, and you get kind of the last word. So I'm going to hand.
I'm finished writing that. That was a good one.
All right, there you go.
Okay.
And as you do get the final word, on behalf of Marty and Jen and the Gentrys and Susan and the actors, I really want to thank you all again for, really leaning in, really engaging, having a really robust conversation. It really warms our hearts to meet you over and over again and see all the progress you're making. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing all of you who will be at workshop number 4.
Yeah. So two things, and then we'll get you on the road on time before 4 o'clock. Mark your calendars. Just reiterating Tim's thoughts. Thanks for showing up again 3 months in a row. We've got the final workshop of this series next month at the Iowa Hospital Association Event Center, so I want to encourage you to be there. There is space, so the focus on workshop 4 is putting it all together. So if you have a member of your team who maybe hasn't made it to the first 3 workshops, it's a good opportunity, I think, to bring them in. Let them hear a piece of what you've been hearing and what you're excited about to generate some conversation. There's space for them. Just send us an email and let us know that you're bringing some additional team members or a doc. We'd love to have them come. certainly we want to thank Tim and his team. And if you wouldn't mind standing up, let's thank, please, Jack and Teresa Gentry for making the special trip to Iowa to be here with us today. We really appreciate you coming to share your story. We know that that's difficult, but it's so meaningful to our work. It helps us center our intentions and our purpose for all being here together. A couple just important announcements. I need for you to make sure that you fill out your CE forms and CME forms and that you do drop those at the registration table on your way out the door. We wish you a safe travel home. Thanks for coming.